Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The trial of a man accused of killing a teenage bystander in a shooting in Vancouver has ended in a mistrial. And
some say we should balance the books now, but this would mean making cuts or increasing fees.
BC records a higher deficit as business leaders ask for a better economic vision ahead of the election.
41% of small business owners have not yet decided who to vote for. And who can blame them?
Plus, mammoth rescue. A trapped humpback whale gets untangled near Haida Gwaii.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. We begin with developing news from the BC courts. A mistrial has been declared in the case of a man accused of killing a teenage bystander in 2018. Kane Carter was on trial for 2 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of 15-year-old Alfred Wong and 23-year-old Kevin Whiteside. They were shot and killed near Broadway and Ontario Street in Vancouver. Wong was hit by a stray bullet while sitting in his parents' car. The jury began deliberating last Friday, but has since come back to say it is deadlocked. The Crown says the parties are now due back in court Wednesday morning. BC's finance minister says our economic picture has dimmed in the first quarter of this year. She says the deficit has risen by more than $1 billion. And as Mira Baines reports, the update comes as business leaders ask for a better economic vision ahead of the fall election.
BC's finance minister says costs to fight wildfires, a downturn in corporate tax revenues, and low natural resource prices are to blame for a growing deficit. The province now stands just shy of $9 billion in the red as the fall election approaches.
Some say we should balance the books now, but this would mean making cuts or increasing fees. This would mean fewer teachers, nurses, schools, and hospitals for people.
The fiscal first quarter report shows the deficit is $1.1 billion more than projected, but forecast to drop by $1 billion more than expected next year as pressures on households ease.
Retail sales are expected to improve next year and strengthen over the medium term as interest rates come down.
Natural resource prices are also expected to improve in the future. Business leaders from across industry sectors gathered to push for changes aimed at better conditions for economic growth.
We're on a concerning pathway, and we need urgent action.
They did not endorse any political party ahead of the election.
British Columbia's provincial election is just around the corner, but 41% of small business owners have not yet decided who to vote for. And who can blame them? Small businesses are feeling left behind.
Industry leaders, one by one, took to the microphone to lobby for reforms. The head of BC's Mining Association took aim at improving permitting times for critical mineral mines needed for clean technology.
It currently takes up to 12 to 15 years to permit and approve a mine in British Columbia. It took only 8 years to put a person on the moon.
The groups have sent a survey of 10 questions to leaders of political parties before the BC election, asking them for a clear economic plan for the province. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, the BC NDP and the BC Conservatives are trading increasingly sharp attacks on social issues that some believe are akin to American-style culture wars. The Premier is going after the Conservatives over abortion, race, and gender identity. The Conservatives claim the government is trying to distract from its own poor record on public safety and affordability. More now from our Legislative Bureau Chief, Katie DeRosa.
We see an attack on reproductive freedoms across North America.
That's why Premier David Eby is touting the NDP's progress on women's reproductive issues, including free birth control and funding for the first round of in vitro fertilization. Even though the BC Conservatives haven't mentioned abortion in their platform, Eby is accusing Conservative leader John Rustad of trying to erode those rights.
It's fairly safe to say that if he is at best ambivalent about reproductive freedom and at worst hostile to it, that women's access to abortion, women's access to free birth control is on the ballot this election, just like it is in the United States.
Rustad would not do an on-camera interview, but says on social media that under a Conservative government, access to abortion, contraception, and other items will remain exactly as it is now. Eby has accused the BC Conservatives of welcoming in candidates who are anti-abortion and have offensive views about LGBTQ and Indigenous people.
The candidates put forward by the BC Conservatives are advancing a hateful agenda.
In a social media post from 2020, Brian Breget, the Conservative candidate for Vancouver-Langara, suggested that Indigenous people don't necessarily have a higher incarceration rate because of systemic discrimination, but rather they commit more crimes, like Black people in the U.S. Breget declined to comment on camera. However, he did address his tweet in an online video, speaking with fellow Conservative candidate Chris Sankey, who is Indigenous.
This tweet is like 4 years old. I never tweeted, my intention wasn't to be racist or offensive.
Breget says Indigenous and Black people suffer from decades of discrimination, and what he calls the woke left do not care about the underlying issues. NDP candidates have also accused Tim Tillman, the BC Conservative candidate for Victoria Beacon Hill, of a bigoted attack on racialized New Democrat MLAs. Tillman criticized the NDP's gender and diversity policy, writing, "Unlike the NDP, our candidates secure their nomination on the basis of their individual merits, not their skin color or identity markers." NDP MLA Aman Singh says it's an example of Trump-style politics meant to divide people. The NDP party policy states that if a departing MLA is a man, they must be replaced by a woman or an equity-seeking candidate. Tillman argues the NDP is exploiting a wedge issue to distract from its poor record on affordability and public safety.
If you point out that they have a policy that promotes people based upon their sex and race and other group identity markers, then they call you a racist.
BC Green Party MLA Adam Olsen says he's concerned by the increasingly polarized political discourse between the NDP and the BC Conservatives.
The extreme right and the extreme left exist in a political narrative. Most people in the province find themselves somewhere in between those. And I think what both political parties are trying to achieve is getting people to fear the other.
Olsen says it only serves to distract from the major issues facing British Columbians, like healthcare and housing. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
The province says it is adding more spaces to its $10 a day childcare program beginning next month. As Michelle Morton explains, advocates say it's a good step, but wait lists still grow.
Rachel Tuttle says she's lucky to have her 2 children in $10 a day childcare.
It takes a huge amount of weight off because you can spend time thinking about other things that you want to think about for your future and for your children, for your family, without that added burden of worrying about the money piece.
Before, she says she was paying more than $2,000 a month for her 2 children. Now, she pays less than a quarter of that.
This has allowed us to stay in the home that we want to stay in, to afford the rent that we need to afford, for me to be able to go back to work comfortably.
In 2021, the federal government earmarked $3.2 billion for BC to expand access to the program to help parents like Tuttle. The province says it will add 5,000 additional spots by spring 2026, with each child enrolled saving families approximately $920 a month on average. Some advocates say this is welcome news, but feel a more massive expansion is needed.
We have about 15,000 10-a-day spaces, which is about 10% of all the childcare, licensed childcare, and that's only going to increase up to 20,000 by 2026.
For parents currently looking for $10 a day daycare, Gregson says it's likely the waitlist is closed because it's just so long that operators are no longer taking names.
We need to attract back the educators who are qualified but left the sector for other better paying careers. So once we get that wage grid, which the provinces have committed to in their action plans with the federal government, then that will make a difference and really allow the sector to start building.
The province says childcare providers can apply to join the $10 a day Childcare BC program during the month of October. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Union for BC Ferries Workers says nearly 80% of staff at Hullo Ferries have voted to unionize. That company's CEO, Alistair Caddick, says he was supportive of that move. BC Ferry and Marine Workers Union says a pending collective deal might include key job issues like stability, wages, and support for career advancement. Hello Ferries launched its service in 2023 and employs over 80 people. It connects foot passengers between the Lower Mainland and Nanaimo. An evacuation order and alerts for the Kikkoman wildfire in the Baines Lake area near Cranbrook have now been lifted. As of 12:30 p.m. earlier in the day, the order for 14 properties and the alert for 38 are no longer in effect. This comes after East Kootenay officials expanded the evacuation order earlier in the morning. As of 8:30 a.m., the BC Wildfire Service says that blaze is being held.
Evacuation orders are not taken lightly, and I'm just so grateful to everyone yesterday for leaving when they were asked to, for cooperating quickly, for getting the information that they needed. And it's always a wonderful feeling to be able to let people go home, but more than that, there were no lives lost. Everyone was able to return home safely, and so it really is a very positive outcome to what could have been a really scary situation yesterday for everyone in that area.
Right now, there are 25 BC wildfire personnel who are working alongside local fire departments to tackle that blaze. And the wildfire has been wrapped in hose lay, and water is being used to dampen it. To a mammoth rescue in BC waters you will want to see and hear. A trapped humpback whale has been untangled in the Hecate Strait between the mainland and Haida Gwaii. An official with Fisheries and Oceans Canada who found the animal spoke with CBC Radio West host Sarah Penton.
Tell us about this humpback whale. How was it first discovered?
We were heading back to Prince Rupert and we got a call of this poor entangled humpback in the middle of Hecate Strait. And we saw this poor whale and we approached. There were lines everywhere, floats everywhere, and just a real sad situation. And it had wraps around the head tight. The animal couldn't even open its mouth. It had ropes through the mouth, through the midsection, embedded into the blubber and skin. So this animal, it was just incredibly, we didn't even know where to start.
How long do you think it had been wrapped up like this in this condition?
What happens is this animal picked up some floats and traps and line, and then it continued to pick up other floats and traps and lines. So we were looking at the gear on the animal, and there was U.S. gear on this animal as well as Canadian commercial crab gear. So it likely was over either several weeks or it could even be several months. This animal has been collecting this gear, trying to get that tension cut and removed. It was like surgery on this animal. And as we were relieving that tension, again, you could see the relief in the animal in terms of its behavior. And we were just amazed that at the end, after 4 days, those final cuts and seeing that mass of floats and rope just come off, and the animal feeling instant relief and speed. And we'll keep an eye on that animal going forward, and hopefully all is well.
Darius Madavi joins us with a first look at the weather. But first, what a rescue.
I know.
Delicate, tough work. This giant animal. Amazing.
They're so big. It's insane that, there's anything we can do to help them. So it's really
Least we could do is clean up our crap, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Now, let's turn to the weather. No whale rescues happening here, but some things that people might want to know about. We have some showers spreading across parts of the south coast, as well as a few lightning strikes, along with some embedded in some showers happening in the southeast. But generally, the rain that's coming over to Vancouver is probably going to be the bigger story. It's the first time in about a week that we're getting any precipitation, and it's not going to be much, but it will be something. And it also means that as the precipitation makes its way across the southern parts of the province, fire danger should come down in the week ahead. That's good news because we still have over 200 active fires in BC. Now, the bad news is that most of those are confined up into the northeast, and this is the region that we're least likely to get some precipitation, or one of the regions where we're least likely to get precipitation. So not great news there, but for the rest of the province, these troughs that are passing over BC are likely to bring some fairly decent rainfall over the next week or so, because some regions at least will get double digits of rain, although not far into the double digits. We do have a ridge of high pressure in for Thursday and Friday, so a little bit of drier weather there, sunnier weather there, but generally the rain is going to be the story. We'll take a closer look at this precipitation map later this hour, but I just wanted to sort of give an idea of the rain that is coming to parts of BC. Other than that, the smoke forecast is a big one because we are entering the end of smoke season, Dan, so even though we do have some haze building in, especially from some fires down in the States, not much of it making down to the surface. So again, bit of good news.
Okay, we'll check in later. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
What are some of the biggest mistakes young people fall into when they get their first credit card? And how can they avoid them? We're going to ask a financial planner right after this. With more financial independence comes more financial responsibility, often in the form of using a credit card for the first time. CBC News spoke with some students, university students, about their tips for handling them.
It's that time of the year when fall semesters are just starting to gear up, and with that, student expenses are too. And they often use credit cards to pay them off. We talked to some students about what they think about owning a credit card. So how has your experience using credit cards been so far?
I think it's been pretty okay. Something that I'm still getting used to since I've had my credit card for less than a year is being on time with payments and just learning how to do things that increase my credit score.
I mean, for someone that hasn't owned a credit card before, it was quite hard to understand, but they were very helpful, so I knew what to do like from the get-go as soon as I got it.
I think with being a student
And, you know, having disposable income for now, one thing is just trying to find ways to maximize like your rewards.
Was it scary to get a credit card before you got it?
A little. I never really had my own cards.
I've heard horror stories of, you know, people not paying off their debt, and then, you know, the interest is just crazy and it takes forever to pay it off. But once I started using it, it seemed relatively simple. Just go in there, you know, at least once a month and pay it off.
My dad wouldn't give me that responsibility earlier and all that, so he was scared about it, but he knew I needed it for like the credit scores and all of that, especially that I'm moving here.
Do you care about your credit score?
Yes, I do. It's quite important here, right? Because compared to my country, China, I guess that's not pretty important. Yeah, but here when you have a student loan, maybe in the future, it needs to depend on your credit.
I'd say it's a little daunting to like learn about the how your credit score works and stuff like that, because you're not really taught how that works, but not scary, just like have to learn about it.
If your credit is bad, or if you go below a certain threshold, you need to like pay more and then interest rates. But if you're on top of your finances, I feel like there shouldn't really be a problem. Everything should be okay.
And to take a deeper look at some of the common mistakes younger people make when getting their first credit cards, we're joined by Xin Liu. He's a financial planner with Coast Capital Savings Federal Credit Union. Xin, thanks for joining us. What are some of those most common mistakes somebody, perhaps they're younger, make when they get their credit card for the first time?
Right. I think it's a combination of two things. So one is poor management of their credit cards, perhaps poor credit behavior in terms of spending past your budget. Either that's spending for others and trying to keep up with the Joneses in that sense, or just that temporary escapism of having to buy something new until it's not fun anymore. The other would just be a misunderstanding of how credit cards actually work and not knowing what the fine print is.
Now, I remember these tables at university, and they're trying to sign you up for all kinds of things. Do you think credit card companies and those offering them do a good enough job of explaining them?
Well, that's a difficult thing because there's so much information on that credit card, and really what they do is give you the fine print when the credit card is delivered and expect you to read it. But you and I both know when we open that shiny new package, are we really going to read the instructions, or are we going to go ahead? Not all of them. Exactly, right. Yeah. So they definitely can do a better job of it, but the information is there as long as you seek it.
Some of the comments we heard from the university students we talked to, it sounded as if they were a bit daunted by the process, perhaps not scared. What is the benefit of getting a credit card, particularly when it comes to credit rating?
That's very interesting. So anything that you do in life where if you want to buy a house and progress, you're going to have good credit. And a credit card is one of the first things that you get in order to build that. I think it's quite important for young individuals to be responsible with the credit card, and it can be very helpful.
What sort of credit cards should a university student or somebody perhaps getting their first one look for? One's better than the others?
That's a good question. Now, if you are absolutely brand new and you are just starting out, many banks, especially us at Coast Capital, we have a student banking package where there is a specific credit card that has the three things I'm looking for. It's got a low limit, it's got low interest, and it's free. So it's a great place to start.
When you say low interest, can you give us a sense of that? How low is low?
Well, your low interest is generally still around anywhere from 11 to 19%, which doesn't sound very low, and I understand that. But oftentimes when you look at other credit cards, anywhere from 21 to 29%, that can still be a lot of savings. So you don't want to get caught in a situation where it's your first credit card, oops, you spent a little bit too much, and then all of a sudden you've got really high interest costs. So if you can save anywhere, that's a great place to start.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. What are perhaps 1 to 2 tips that you would give for somebody who's just got the card and thinking, how should I manage this?
It's a really good question. I would say I've got 3 basic tips for anybody that's starting off in credit cards. The first thing is spend within your budget, preferably keeping your spending or your balance within about 30% of your credit card limit. The second one is don't be afraid to unpeel the Band-Aid and really look underneath at what your statement is. Making sure that every 2 weeks, hey, you're getting a paycheck. Also take a look at your credit card statement and perhaps pay some of that off. Make sure you're on track. And the third tip, most importantly, is always follow tip number 1 and 2.
Okay, good advice. Xin Liu from Coast Capital, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
At 6:25, a live look at Donald Trump and Kamala Harris on stage for tonight's U.S. presidential debate. The two candidates have 90 minutes to try to persuade American voters to back them. The latest from Philadelphia, next. And there is a live look at Donald Trump and Kamala Harris on stage debating at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia tonight, with the first and perhaps only debate of this year's U.S. presidential election now underway. Vice President Harris and former President Trump are trying to sway voters in their bids for the country's highest office. They have 90 minutes to present their vision for America's future. Ahead of the debate, most polls suggest the race is essentially tied. Trump's advisors say he'll zero in on economic worries and link Harris to unpopular policies under the Biden administration. On the other hand, Harris's advisors say she'll present a positive vision for the country, but they expect Trump will launch personal attacks and an onslaught of lies. Let's go live now to Rafferty Baker, who's at a debate watch party at The Pleasant in Vancouver, put on by the BC Mainland Chapter of Democrats Abroad. You can hear some clapping in there. They're the official arm of the Democratic Party for Americans living outside the U.S. Rafferty, what's the mood there right now?
Well, there's no audience for the debate in Philadelphia, but there's a big audience here, almost capacity, about 150 people, all Democrats, Americans, everyone I spoke to, taking this in. You can hear the cheers and the occasional jeers when Donald Trump says something that they don't agree with here. And everyone I spoke to here says there's quite a lot riding on this. It's potentially the only debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and it could be a very tight election. Listen to this.
I think it's going to affect Canada because we're so tied to the U.S. here.
I don't think we can ignore what's going on in the politics of the United States.
Very curious. I'm very interested to watch. I mean, partly it's going to be entertaining.
Honestly, though, a lot of it is me being here for the community and trying to help get out the vote in any way that I can, even though I'm not back in the States right now.
And Rafferty, what are Democrats abroad organizers hoping to get out of an event like this?
Well, this is an opportunity for them, the first time in years to actually gather to watch these debates. Of course, the last election cycle was during the pandemic and they couldn't do things like this. So the organizers are hoping to build community among their supporters. They're also hoping to take in the debate, as you can hear behind me, have some laughs, enjoy it, but also get their vote out. They say that in British Columbia, there are an estimated 150,000 eligible U.S. voters, and organizer Jennifer Phillips says that's plenty to sway the election in tight races.
We are definitely the margin of victory. We're the unsung heroes, I think. For example, Georgia was won, I think, by 14,000 votes, and we have 19,000 Georgians abroad. Some races, local races are won by only a handful of votes, 100 of votes, and our voters are that margin of victory.
This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election.
Rafferty Baker live at a debate watch party in Vancouver. Rafferty, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Back in Canada, the man many have speculated could replace Justin Trudeau made his first public comments as a top Liberal advisor on economic growth. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and Canada, appeared today at the caucus retreat in BC. But as Rafi Boudjikanian shows us, he wouldn't reveal much about his political future.
For months, Mark Carney dodged questions about his future with the Liberals. Now, the former governor of central banks in Canada and England is the party's top advisor on economic growth.
It comes at, in my view, a decisive time for our economy, for our country. Every major economy is accelerating their energy transition, and being low carbon is becoming a key driver of competitiveness.
Carney wouldn't respond to speculation he might be seeking the party leadership or a seat in the next federal election.
Prime Minister of Canada asked me to do something, I will do it. I will serve to the best of my ability. Secondly, I'm interested in doing something, not being something.
Shoring up voter support is top of mind here. A key test comes in less than a week. A long-standing Liberal seat is up for grabs in a Montreal by-election, with Liberals, NDP, and the Bloc Québécois running almost neck and neck.
I'm convinced we will win.
Oh, wow! Merci beaucoup. The NDP leader campaigned in that riding after his caucus met to consider in part how to approach the confidence votes that could bring down the government, now that his party has abandoned the agreement to keep the Liberals in power.
We're not looking for a new agreement. So we've torn up the agreement. There is no new deal. What we're going to do in the next parliament is we're going to fight for people.
But the Liberals may get support from the Bloc.
How do you feel about getting all of this additional power?
Good. Thank you.
That instability also means Trudeau may not have a full year left before all Canadians head back to the polls, making whatever strategy his party devises here all the more crucial for their survival in the months ahead. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Nanaimo, BC.
Musician Jacob Hogarth, now serving a 5-year sentence after being convicted of sexual assault, is asking to be released on bail. A lawyer for the former Headley singer told an Ontario courtroom that bail was appropriate as Hogarth tries to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court of Canada. In a court filing, Hogarth said he's being held in solitary confinement after receiving threats. The judge has reserved her decision until later this week. Canada's immigration minister has revealed that a man arrested on terror charges last week came into the country on a student visa. The minister didn't provide many details, but says the system in place to detect and apprehend such people worked.
Let's not be naive. A determined individual can gain access to this country, and then it's for the security services inside our country to apprehend this person if they commit a crime or if they're about to commit a crime, and that's exactly what happened.
The 20-year-old was arrested in Quebec on charges including attempting to leave Canada to commit an offense for a terrorist group. He's also facing terror charges in the U.S. American officials say he intended to carry out a mass shooting at a Jewish center in New York. The immigration minister says the suspect is a Pakistani national who received a student visa in May of last year and arrived in Canada the next month. The Civil Defense Authority in Gaza says at least 19 people were killed in overnight Israeli missile strikes. Witnesses say there were between 4 and 6 blasts in a designated humanitarian area in southern Gaza. The area was jammed with displaced Palestinians, many living in tents. The search for more victims is ongoing. Israel says it launched the attack against 3 senior Hamas commanders operating in that area. It says extensive precautions were taken to avoid civilian casualties. It's not known if those Hamas officials were hit. Canada's following the U.S. in imposing taxes on China's electric vehicles. Why they're doing this and what it means for consumers. Next.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond. Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Francine has now reached hurricane status as it plows toward the U.S. Gulf Coast.
I wasn't really taking it serious until now. I see it's really real.
Louisiana will likely be hit hardest. The state has already closed schools, issued evacuation orders, and declared a state of emergency in preparation for landfall on Wednesday. Darius Madavi now back with our second look at the BC-wide weather, but let's go back to Francine as we did last night. That's okay. Just turning on his microphone, folks. No need to panic.
Thank you.
There we are.
Hello.
Live TV.
I'm here to tell you about the hurricane.
There we go.
It is currently turning upward, northeastward, much faster than it was yesterday. And as it continues to move up, it is picking up strength. We have extremely warm ocean waters, record-breakingly warm 30, 31 degrees Celsius. To sustain itself, a hurricane only needs water temperatures of around 26 degrees Celsius. So this is allowing it to strengthen fairly quickly. The atmospheric conditions are also favorable for it to continue to strengthen, although it is pulling in some dry air from Texas, or if it's not, it will likely soon. That should sort of put a limit on the amount it can strengthen. And then also, it'll experience some much less favorable conditions as it approaches the coast. So again, putting sort of a cap on the amount that it will be able to strengthen before it makes landfall. But we can see even in just a few hours today how the eye has become quite a bit more defined as it continues to swirl. You can sort of see it picking up strength. Now, it just sort of crossed the boundary between a tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane not too long ago, just 2 hours or so ago. But as it continues to track further north, expected to continue to pick up strength. Before it makes landfall, it'll either be a strong Category 1 or a weak Category 2 hurricane. But either way, the damage it can do, the devastation it can bring will be fairly similar, and it will be high regardless of what category the hurricane is when it makes landfall. We're talking 150 to 160 kilometer winds, possibly up to 100 millimeters of rainfall in some areas, and then continuing to make its way north through quite a bit of the states as a tropical depression, bringing, again, very heavy rainfall. So definitely a story to watch tomorrow as it makes landfall, likely in the afternoon or evening. Meanwhile, here in BC, much more calm, also some precipitation coming, nothing like a hurricane would bring, but as this weak cold front continues to work its way, weak trough continues to make its way across the province, we expect to see some rain move over tonight, but then mostly clear up for the afternoon, and then late tomorrow evening, also clearing up the cloud, not just the rain. So expect on Thursday and Friday to see a little bit more dry conditions, a little bit more sunshine. Across the province, it's fairly similar. That precipitation we're getting tonight comes to the interior tomorrow before clearing out of the province. Thursday and Friday look a bit drier, a bit clearer across much of BC, but then again, the rain returns as we get into the weekend for much of the province, if not all of it. If we take a look at our conditions for tomorrow, again, we're cool, we're below seasonal. Many places are seeing a little bit of rain, but also, especially in the south, but also some sunshine. And in Vancouver, Dan, we're expecting, again, a little bit of rain, but also some clearer skies.
That's okay. And we could use some rain.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Canada is stepping in line with the U.S. and imposing 100% tariffs on all electric vehicles coming from China to combat the, quote, unfair advantage it has in the global marketplace. CBC's About That producer Dan Burritt explores why North America is slamming the door on a massive source of cheap electric vehicles, why experts say consumers will pay the price.
Past few weeks, both the US and Canada have announced they'd be slapping massive tariffs on electric cars coming from China. And when I say massive, I mean a 100% tax.
106.1%. That's up from 6.1%.
EVs from China are by far the cheapest on the market, even cheaper than most new gas cars in North America. So, at a time when both Canada and the US are trying to get everyone driving EVs in the next few years, why is North America closing the door on an ultra-cheap source?
I think the idea here is to protect this infant industry, this early industry that's being developed, but it comes at a cost to consumers.
Let's go through it. There are a couple reasons both Canada and the US are concerned about EVs coming from China. First is the sheer amount of cars the country is producing.
More than half of all new EVs sold worldwide are from China.
Indeed, the country doesn't just make the finished product, but everything in between.
China is really cementing its position as a powerhouse in the global EV auto industry.
China has become one of the biggest EV manufacturers in a really short period of time. Exports increased more than 1,000% from 2018 to 2023. Last year, the country exported nearly 1.6 million EVs, more than any other exporter.
This was an intentional plan in China. Let's just leapfrog over the internal combustion engine where we can't compete, where GM, BMW, and Volkswagen have the vast market share even in China, and let's see if we can become global players and dominate in the EV sphere.
But maybe the biggest threat to the North American market lies in just how cheap China is able to sell them for. For example, let's compare BYD, China's biggest EV maker, to US-based Tesla. According to Reuters, a few months ago, BYD listed a new version of the Atto 3 at less than $17,000 USD. Meanwhile, the cheapest Tesla you can buy right now in the US is about $45,000 USD. Both Canadian and American governments have argued that that price, $17,000, isn't market value. They say it's artificially low.
Actors like China have chosen to give themselves an unfair advantage in the global marketplace, so we're taking action to address that.
Simply put, we don't make anything in North America that could compete on that price scale.
And here's some insight into why. For one thing, they're subsidized heavily by the government. A recent report by a US think tank estimated the Chinese Communist Party provided over $230 billion US in subsidies to EV makers between 2009 and 2023. Those included things like buyer rebates, tax exemptions, R&D funding, and government procurement. Analysts say many of these companies also get ultra-low interest loans, and some even get direct financing from the state.
We're at the point where the subsidies can't be ruled out as a defining factor in how cheap these are.
Now, to be fair, Canada and the US do also subsidize EVs with pretty big tax breaks and rebates. But in China, it's not just the cars that are subsidized. It's the entire supply chain.
From the mineral development, mineral refining, to transportation, to shipping, it's subsidized across the board, so that helps. And the environmental standards are not as rigid in China, right? So they're producing these cars largely using coal-fired power, which is itself subsidized to keep prices low for these private car companies.
Another reason analysts say China's able to keep prices so low, multiple investigations have shown EV makers in China get their raw materials from what the Chinese government calls re-education camps, and what human rights activists call forced labor.
What is this Chinese policy of oversupply and overcapacity built on? You know what it's built on? It is built on abysmal labor standards, and it is built on abysmal environmental standards.
So given the subsidies, the environmental and labor standards, the argument is that Chinese companies would be able to flood the market with cheap EVs, and North American companies just wouldn't be able to compete.
There is a level of a plateau right now in terms of sales within China of electric vehicles. And so what does a company do that is just churning these things out with the help of subsidies? Well, they look for other countries to absorb that production.
The reality is China has an intentional state-directed policy of overcapacity and oversupply designed to cripple our own industries. We simply will not allow that to happen to our EV sector, and in which we have invested so effectively.
This crackdown on EV imports, according to government leaders, is first and foremost about protecting the future of the North American auto industry and the hundreds of thousands of people who work in it.
And to make sure American workers and American business corporations can compete and win in the industries of the future.
Whether tariffs will save those jobs is another question.
Whether it's going to have an impact protecting these manufacturers down the road remains to be seen. It really comes down to whether the manufacturers that will be operating EV plants in Canada will offer products that actually resonate with the consumers.
When it comes to EVs, Canada doesn't exactly have a booming sector, but it is making significant investments toward that end, particularly in batteries. Right now, almost all the EVs sold here are made in the US. The big picture, though, is about a united North American front.
This automotive industry is totally integrated with the United States. It always has been, and it always will be.
Traditionally, cars and car parts get sent across the borders at several steps of manufacturing. What happens in one affects the other. The thinking is no different for EVs.
Canada, being a very integrated economy with the United States, there's a lot of pressure in Washington that Mexico and Canada not become kind of side doors or back doors for products like EVs. So that's largely what's going on here.
But here's where things get complicated. Because as I touched on earlier, both countries still do have ambitious goals when it comes to EVs, with very tight deadlines.
I don't see how we could possibly meet those goals, because I don't think that the American or European automobiles can come in fast enough to replace the cheap cars at the lower price range that could come from China now.
By 2035 in Canada, it will be mandated that every single new car sold has to be electric. Right now, we're at about 11% a year, and that target is only a decade away. For a lot of potential buyers, it seems out of reach.
A survey by Auto Trader found that more than half of Canadians say they don't want to buy an electric car as their next vehicle.
A big part of that hesitation cited in that survey is price. According to the Canadian Black Book, the average cost of a new car in Canada is around $66,000. For an EV, it's $73,000. So people just aren't buying them. As a result, many North American manufacturers are actually cutting their EV production. Now here's where the 100% tariff and the EV targets appear to clash. If there's no cheaper alternative on the market, how's the government going to get everyone buying electric cars in just a few years?
What we're seeing right now is we're in the early stages of a transition, but we've gone from 3 EVs in 2012 in the Canadian market to over 80 now in virtually every size and segment. So the vehicles are here, but the industry does need more time to allow these major investments, $40 billion and counting in Canada, to actually achieve their economies of scale.
So while the stated goal is to help protect the North American auto industry, it's likely there will be ripple effects felt in at least 2 major ways.
Tariffs, generally speaking, are seen as a tax on consumers. Consumers will feel the pain of these measures.
You're reducing the choice for consumers, which means EVs produced in China, which currently means mostly Teslas, would be actually frozen out of the Canadian market.
The tariffs also raise the stakes for Canada's relationship with China.
These actions undermine China-Canada trade ties, harm Canadian companies and consumers' interests, and do no good to Canada's green transition and global climate response.
Experts have said we should prepare for retaliation.
The usual pattern for China is they look at what a country exports. Barley, canola, pork could be subject to tariffs because China knows that they can get these products elsewhere.
Canada needs to be ready for all manner of reactions, and we are.
A new 25% tariff on Chinese-made steel and aluminum was also part of this starting point. And next on the tariff horizon, the government is considering batteries, semiconductors, and solar panels, to name a few.
Up next, we take a look at how some long-term care centers in Prince Edward Island are promising their residents a really good time. Stick around.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox. On October 5th, join CBC guest host Michelle Elliott at the annual Big Sisters Soiree Gala, celebrating Big Sisters and helping to inspire and empower the next generation of girls and gender-diverse youth. Tickets at bigsisters.bc.ca. And join CBC at the Alumni UBC's Transforming Our Health with AI webinar, October 8th. A panel of experts discuss AI research and its impact on the future of healthcare.
A cycling program is bringing joy to people with mobility issues in PEI. The specially designed bikes have a carriage in front.
Here's what people have to say about it.
I love it. I think it's great. Maybe I could learn to run it.
Hi! So we are pleased to introduce 3 trishaws to the Summerside area. One at Somerset Manor, one at Wedgwood Manor, and one at the Community Connections.
They're an electronic bike. You do have to pedal a little bit, but it's assisted pedaling that you can take residents or clients out on.
Nobody wants to spend their day inside all the time. And if we have something like this, then it gives us that opportunity to get out and breathe in some fresh air and feel alive.
Recreation, occupational therapists, and physiotherapists are been doing the program now for a number of weeks, and residents are really enjoying it.
Have fun, Cecil.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're always looking for creative ways to improve the quality of life for our residents at both manors. And when this opportunity came, these bikes were donated to us.
And the Rotary Club took on the cause and raised $36,000, which they then donated to Cycling Without Age in order to allow the purchase of these first 3 trishaws.
Does it bring back memories?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
It does. Starting to wave to people then that we're driving, and for them just to wave back and say hello will really add to the experience for residents.
They're why we're there, yeah. We want them to experience the most they can, yeah. And have a quality of life, right, that they deserve, yeah. And this brings quality of life as well.
Not able to get out and around on my own as much, it's a good thought that maybe today I can get out on that rickshaw and go for a ride.
I didn't know they were running a race. That's fun.
I know. So great to see. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube.
Michelle Gassou will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. So please join her then. Good night.